Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Risk Matrix with James Junkin.
The
Hi,
risk
James.
matrix.
That's him, the Risk Matrix. And with me, Dr. Martin, we're going to talk today about human error. So hold on to your hats because we have some things that might make you want to put things down in the comments section and tell us how we're crazy. And with that, James, I've challenged you to talk about human error because I've been listening to you talk about some of the things that you've been investigating over the last several months, fatalities and serious injuries. And I am going to ask you this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What happens if you have all the systems in place? You've got a good safety management system. You've got all things meshed together. You're ready for resilience in the system, and somebody still makes a wrong decision.
Okay. These are very controversial topics over the last 10 years, I would say. And it's really about how we design work. And the thought process is that human error situations, for the most part, are predictable. And if we design the precursor, the potential for human error into the system itself, human beings will make mistakes. So in order to have a resilient system, you have to start off with the premise that human beings are going to make mistakes. I need to, when I'm designing the work, look for when human beings can make mistakes and put countermeasures in place. So if they make a mistake, it doesn't end in disaster. Now,
Can you always do that though?
not always.
Okay.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Situations are predictable. They're predictable. Okay.
Are there any cases where you blame the worker?
Sadly, I have. But
Okay.
it is against my DNA to blame the worker.
Totally agree. Totally
Okay.
agree.
Because no one comes to work to get seriously injured or killed. Now, from an academic standpoint, when you go and you present this to field safety professionals who are out there where the boots get muddy and the metal meets the meat, this always comes up. It always comes up. James, this sounds great, but I've taught these guys. We put countermeasures in place. We've done these things, and some people just don't get it. And they're right. They're right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
We approach some of these safety philosophies as if they're absolutes, and there are no absolutes if human beings are involved. So I want to preface these remarks I'm fixing to make by me stating right up front, human error situations are for the most part predictable, and barriers and defenses can be put in place in the design of the work. So if someone makes a mistake, it doesn't end in disaster. Dr. Trevor Kletz from down in Texas A&M probably said it best. In a well-designed system, somebody turning a valve wrong should not result in disaster. You should anticipate that somebody might turn a valve wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But human beings go human being, right? And sometimes, even in the best situations, there's not a countermeasure for an overt act. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Tower climbing. When I first started doing consulting for companies that were doing tower climbing, it was the Wild West. In a lot of ways, it still is. But thank goodness for Nate for bringing some safety to the tower climbing industry. It's literally the deadliest occupation in the United States. As these people go out there and work on these cell phone towers, and a lot of it was free climbing. No one wanted to tie off. They just get up there and climb right on up 385 feet off the ground. And you know what's happening? They were falling. So you institute a program, a training program, you institute checks, you train people, you go out there, you observe them at work, you spot check, you have a progressive disciplinary program. And then one morning, somebody goes out there and free climbs a tower, ignoring the pleas of people below to stop the job, and they fall. There's not a safety management system out there that can countermeasure, I don't care. It's just not.
Well, so I'm gonna take this another turn and say, sometimes people don't care because they think that there are other priorities within the system. That might be productivity, quality. You know, to some workers, it might be, I'm going to lose my job if I don't save these 5 seconds here, right? So in that respect, I mean, so I think there are overt acts, and I think that in some respects, if you have somebody who creates randomness in the system, and it's you know, totally overt and continual, that sometimes you need to take somebody out of the system, right? Because they're creating you know, an unsafe environment for both themselves, but also the workers around them. But one of the other trending topics in safety is this idea of psychosocial and psychological safety, which our friend Dr. Daniels talks about a lot, that organizations sometimes create within their system, inadvertently or advertently, they create an atmosphere where workers will make poor choices, or make several poor choices because they feel that the organization has things that will either harm them if they don't do it a certain way, or they'll be ridiculed by other workers, or things of that nature, right? So
yeah, I think ridicule by other workers is often more dominant from a pressure standpoint than perceived actions by management. Okay. Just having been in the field and worked with a bunch of different groups over my career, peer pressure on the job is more prevalent than management pressure. You know, even in my organization, my team doesn't see me at the forefront all the time, but they put pressure on themselves sometimes for unknown reasons. Like, I'm not putting pressure on you for this. Well, I thought if I didn't do this, you know, that kind of thing. Psychosocial hazards are a real thing. They're a real thing. And to kind of back up to your earlier comment, I think for the most part, human error situations are predictable, right? And when someone makes a mistake, or someone doesn't even make a mistake, they overtly do something to defeat some of your defenses, you can plan for that, but you can't plan for I don't care. So let me give you an example. Machine guarding. Machines have guards because human beings want to put their hands inside of machines. Whenever we have a serious injury or fatality, the actions of the worker are always in question. And one of the questions everyone has for me is, James, why did that person do what they did? And I rarely can answer that, and never if they're deceased.
Right.
We can have supposition of what the motivators were. We can evaluate the organizational culture. We can do that. But back to my example, several years ago, gentleman been working in an organization at that company for 12 years. They helped design the lockout tagout procedure for this machine. Went in early one morning and it was jammed. And so what did that person do? He removed the guard and reached in the machine and got hung up in the machine and amputated his arm from about here down, and a lot of blood loss, and ultimately the individual lost his life, right? in that instance. So why would someone who is trained, who knows what the hazards are, who helped develop,
created the policy, right?
created the procedure and the policy, take that action? I don't know. But the fact that somebody might do that is predictable. That's why we have light curtains. That's why we have interlocks.
Mhm.
Because human beings are going to take risks, chances, shortcuts for whatever motivating factor there is. So when you're designing the system, you understand people are not going to be perfect. The worker's not our enemy. The worker is our asset. You want to close up shop, get rid of all your workers. Number one complaint from CEOs today is they can't find enough workers.
Yep.
But there are times when this becomes a leadership issue. Many times in my career, the most productive worker was the one also that took the most risk.
Yes.
Okay. They'd be the one to say, hey, I'm going to cut across here. Well, there's material handling equipment all through here, man. We got this path for you to stay on so you don't get crushed. I'll look out for it, And maybe something happens, maybe nothing happens. People that refuse to wear certain PPE when they're performing hot work or something of that nature.
Or working with chemicals.
There's a bravado that comes out that has something to do with deeper psychology.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else that's going on. And my advice to CEOs is sometimes that person doesn't need to be on your team. And what I get back is, man, I can't make it without this person. And I'm like, you're not going to make it with this person.
Right.
Because some people go through life. Have you ever heard this statement? I've been doing it this way for 20 years and I've never had a problem.
Yeah. Until you do. Until you do. Now, maybe that person keeps doing it that way for another 20 years, retires with a gold watch, and ends up down in Florida on the beach. But who are they influencing? 6 other people coming up through the ranks.
So I like the way Coach Saban said it. And he said it best about leadership. Leadership is getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right seats, in the jobs that they perform best at, that accentuate their talents. But it's also getting the wrong people off the bus. Now, this is just my experience talking. I don't have a study, but it'd be good to study this, to be honest with you. In this era of the great retirement, the great resignation, new employees coming into the workforce, right? Older, more experienced employees leaving the workforce, the generational gap with Gen X, and more people having to fill roles that require more experience because there's not enough of us in my age group to fill that natural progression that you've seen historically in America's workforce based on men or trade. It would be very interesting to look at and to see if some of these attitudes are also contributing factors in some of these incidents that we're seeing.
So I'm going to add to your Nick Saban bus analogy. And I'm going to say, yes, you need to get the right people on the bus. And you need to get them in the right seats that accentuate their talents. And you also need to get the wrong people off the bus. But in order to do that, you have to have created and curated what your organizational culture and your values and your mission and everything is going to look like, so that everybody knows before you start placing people where you're going to place them, what the expectations are and the different factors that go into ensuring that they feel supported to take ownership and to get into those positions and feel confident that they can communicate things that are wrong, right? Or They can learn in the way that they're supposed to learn, right? If you have that in place, and then you start placing people on the bus, and there's still somebody that goes off and does their own thing, then unfortunately, and this is going to be unpopular, unfortunately, you can't tolerate that piece of human error, right? I like what you said about, I can't live without this person on the team. A lot of times you can't live with that person on the team because they will cause you more risk and more money and more productivity when something does happen, because it will happen, right? I was talking about this with a friend the other day, that there is failure in everything. Okay. I was talking about this with an engineer. Widgets. When you're making widgets have a failure rate, right? When you have 100 people in the room, there's a failure rate there. Whatever task you have, there's either 100 of them succeed, but 3 or 4 of them barely, right? Or some of them don't succeed. There's always a failure rate in everything, and your preparation for that error is everything. And it starts with organizational culture, and it starts with psychological safety and psychosocial safety, and creating the environment for people to thrive and to learn and to change.
So why you can't have bad apples? Most of the time, in my experience, it's not the bad apple. It's the tree it came from.
Yep. But that being said, sometimes people don't fit and they got to go.
Sometimes they got to go.
That's going to be so unpopular. I hope people put stuff in the chat about that comment.
And of course they are, and we're going to get beat up for saying this, but I want to say again, I just throw statistics. Sometimes I just make up numbers, right? Okay. You know, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Who said that? Was that Mark Twain? I think said that.
Probably, yeah.
But it's kind of that way. All right. So the vast majority of incident investigations that are done that I review, because usually by the time I get involved, the company's already done an incident investigation, right? At least a preliminary one with some preliminary findings. They have incorrectly misidentified the worker's actions, human error, if you will, as the sole source of the incident. I am a firm believer in Dr. Reason's 1990 book, Human Error, where he said, rather than being the main instigators of an incident, I'm paraphrasing here, workers tend to be the inheritance of faulty maintenance, poor tool selection, and bad management decisions. Their role is usually that of adding the final garnish to a lethal brew that has been long in the cooking. Okay? So I don't want anybody come with me. Don't you want to get me fired up, go down there and say James got all about blaming the worker. The worker's actions usually are the final step. And it was predictable. So our system was not dynamic and resilient enough to be able to withstand that worker's error. And what I find over and over and over again is that incident was precipitated by another incident very similar months, if not years before. And nothing changed. And this is another quote by Dr. Kletz I like. Organizations don't have memory. People have memory. And when people leave the organization, the memory of that incident is gone. They make a report, they file it away, they put it in a drawer, they send it to their client about these corrective actions they're going to do, and it's forgotten about, only to be repeated. Okay? So I want to be clear about my stance on human error. But sometimes people got to go.
People got to go.
People got to go. Okay?
And that's okay, right? That's okay if you are doing it with intention and logic and really laying the groundwork for workers to be successful, right? If you're really creating that system and it's a resilient system and you're looking at all the forces that act upon things and you're preparing for human error, and you still have somebody that continues to make personal choices as opposed to organizational choices, right? Then they got to go.
So
They got to go.
I think the safest industry on the planet is the airline industry. When you think about the number of commercial flights that take off and land every day and the public's tolerance for risk and failure. When I train my students to come through Veriforce's trainer for Safe Land USA Basic 2021, I always ask them, how many aircraft are you okay with falling out of the sky on an annual basis? And the answer is none. There is zero tolerance for failure, because if you have an airline crash, most of the time we're talking about hundreds of fatalities.
Hundreds of people.
Okay. So the tolerance level is zero, but still within the airline industry, there's human error. There's pilot error. There are systems.
There's mechanical error.
There's mechanical error. And really, if you want to get to, are all accidents really human error? I guess you could say that. Every accident's human error, but like Dr. Klepp said, it's like saying all falls are due to gravity. That's true, but it's not very helpful, is it? Right? Yeah. Accounting for human error, the NTSB has put in recommendations, and the industry has responded to make more automated systems, so when a pilot makes a mistake, it doesn't result in disaster. But are there still some actions that pilots could make from a human error standpoint and crash the plane? Absolutely. In Indonesia, the flight that took off and the pilot, based on all available evidence, deliberately drove that plane into the ocean. There's not a safety management system that can account for that. Okay. Other than total automation, just taking it over. Now, bringing that to our workplaces. Behavioral modification has not worked. It just hasn't worked. It may have worked in sending down the OSHA recordable injury rate, and that's a whole topic for another discussion, but it's done nothing to end serious injuries and fatalities in the workplace. The only thing that's going to end serious injuries and fatalities in the workplace is understanding we have to have systems that acknowledge that human beings make mistakes and account for that. But if you're going to be the cog in the system that just is not going to assimilate, then we may have to make some disciplinary actions and some changes. That's why we have progressive disciplinary programs. And OSHA recommends you have progressive disciplinary programs. And if you're going to use employee bad act as a defense, you better have a disciplinary program and show that you've used it. If not, it's out the door.
I was just going to say, look, everybody that I've seen is all into this progressive discipline, and they have policies and procedures and all that kind of stuff. And then they go right out the window, right? If we have these things and we don't follow them, right, then, you know, I find it hard to say, get rid of somebody, right? But if you're progressive and you're monitoring and you're doing the things you say you do, you will be able to know when somebody shouldn't have the seat on the bus.
I'll give you an example, okay, of a predictable human error situation. This was in the Northeast in a refinery, and the precursors for this accident began when they designed the laydown area for the site. So trying to get where employees were going to be, like break areas and porta potties and things, out of the natural flow of the work environment, they set them off sort of to the edge, and they put the porta potties at the very edge of the site. Well, in the design, someone also thought there's a good big space right there between the break area and the porta potties. That'd be a great place for material handling equipment and heavy equipment to traffic to and from the site. Well, gentleman went to lunch. He stepped into the porta potty. He stepped out. He did not look both ways. Killed him. Got hit by a big dozer. Killed him. Now, we could say, well, you should look both ways.
And he knew better.
And we should retrain all of our people to look both ways. Now, is that effective? Yeah. Am I the only person that's out there that's never been distracted when you stepped out in front of something and somebody pulled me back, or somebody honked a horn, or you change lanes in a vehicle and somebody honked you because you didn't see them in your blind spot? Am I the only person that's ever? Of course, every human being's had that. Human error situations are predictable in the most part. So don't put the heavy equipment trafficking where the people are going to be.
Right. Right.
And
that's work design. That's planning. That's
planning the work.
That's thinking ahead. That's doing hazard identification. That's putting controls in place. Right. And that, I mean, and don't think that that's a worker thing. You know, I mean, like if you're involved in the pre-planning process, if you're the safety professional involved in the pre-planning process, and your management, or you're the field superintendent, right? It is your responsibility to think about those things, right? And if you did think about things, there's human error too, right? I mean, you may put something in place that caused that accident, you know, or was a cause, you know, a causal factor to the accident. And this goes back to there's not just like, if you bounce a ball, there's not just gravity that's acting on that ball falling to the earth, right? There's wind, and there's people moving around, and there's other things in the way. And there are a lot of things that act on a site. There's a lot of things that act on a situation before it happens or when it happens, right? And you know, human error, I agree, is a lot of times the last thing. It's the easiest to blame, but most accidents and incidents are caused by root cause, by other things. Root cause.
Absolutely.
Several other things.
Behavior is usually only one of the causal factors. One of the many causal factors. You know, I'm one of these that, if we're going to call it root causes, that's on it. Because rarely in my experience have I found that it's a single thing. More likely it's what Dr. Reason said, the workers are putting the final garnish, their actions, the final thing on a lethal brew that's been long in the cooking. Okay. I love that quote, because it just.
I love that you have it recognized or memorized.
Yep. I've typed it a lot too.
Have you typed it a lot in papers? Probably for me.
Yeah.
So I will say this. I think hopefully this gives some people something to talk about, right? As long as the systems are in place, I'm all about, you know, if they don't fit in the system, then, and you're monitoring the system, that sometimes they got to go, right? But make sure that your systems are in place, your psychological safety is in place, your organizational culture is in place, all those, the mission, values, strategic vision, all those things are in place, so that when you do start to take people off the bus, right, that you do it in a judicious manner. And it's because they don't fit in the system that you created, the safe system that you created, the safety management system, and all those types of things. And not because you're lazy and you want to blame the worker and it's quicker. And, you know, that's the thing you see on the surface. So that's what I kind of want to close with.
I'll say this in closing. Go back and look at your incident investigations and look at what you determine the causes to be. If human error is a repeated theme, you've got something fundamentally wrong in your safety management system. Okay. If your reaction and countermeasure to this human error is always retraining, there's something wrong in your safety management system. Design work and anticipate that human beings are going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, not even safety professionals, right? Work is dynamic. Look into your system. If you have a mature system and an incident occurs, it might get down to the point to where we didn't adequately account for this type of behavior or action by this employee and we need another countermeasure. Or it may be we have an overt act here by this person of which none of us could put a safety system in place that could have accounted and protected that person for it. There's not a safety management system that's 100% foolproof for I don't care. It just isn't.
Agree. And for those of you watching, this is another episode of the Risk Matrix sponsored by Veriforce. And James and I are going to be frequently coming on and talking about topics. What we'd like is that you go and like and follow our YouTube channel. You join in the discussion, put things in the comments. Maybe it'll come up on a future show. If we made you mad, say it. We want to hear other ideas and philosophies and different takes on things. And I will leave you with this. If you're one of those people that believes that there's a silver bullet for safety, there's not, and it just depends. So thanks for listening. This has been James Junkin.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, and Dr. Martin.